So welcome everybody to the final invited symposium. So the topic is diversity in social interactions. We have a fairly diverse set of speakers and they're going to be telling us about how they think of studying diversity within a social interaction from the individual to the group level. As before, what we're going to be doing is taking questions both from the audience and from the chat. So without further ado, we have our first speaker, Nia Dowell-Nixon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. As I was telling my other speakers, I'm actually calling in from the conference hotel room or conference because we unfortunately tested positive for COVID. So we made it all the way here and I'm unable to join you in person, but I'm very grateful for technology that we're able to do it this way. So today I wanted to talk to you about some recent research that we've been doing, which explores inclusion and equity in team environments using new temporally sensitive natural language processes that allow us to really get into the social and cognitive mechanisms that drive any type of human interaction. And we do this because we're at a very unique place in history where we have innovation in science and and technology that is accelerating our reliance on virtual teams and their collaborative effort to solve complex societal, environmental, and most recently, public health safety things with COVID. And as a result, communication and collaborative problem solving have taken a central place in both research and policies. Now, these digitally mediated team environments hold the potential to be more equitable and inclusive for different populations, but unfortunately, they're not characterized as such. Now, in team environments, women and underrepresented minorities face a host of different issues or barriers, such as not feeling welcome to participate, limited opportunities to participate, limited perceived power when they do engage with others, and consequences being lower sense of belonging when you leave an interaction, lower self-efficacy. Now, the research suggests that the causes and consequences of this are numerous, but two major ones are the intra and interpersonal dynamics. And so what we'll be getting into today is how my lab starts to quantify those things and interactions. Now, this is not a new topic. There have been research efforts starting to look at this. However, some of the methodologies that they use have been sort of surface level, including frequency of posts. So how much are women and males participating in a team, or using manual content analysis of really lengthy, theoretically motivated measures that you have to go through and literally code each one by hand. And with the scale of data that we're dealing with now, that's not always feasible. Now, these initial surface level approaches have really highlighted the differences for different populations and team environments, but we can go a little bit further, because these practices tend to obscure the sequential structure and semantic references within a discussion and the situated methods of interaction through which meaning actually emerges. As such, the approach provides only a very coarse level granularity. So just knowing that, for instance, males are dominating interaction in terms of how much they're talking isn't actually enough. You need to understand the relationship between their utterances over time to see what is the responsivity or social impact of different individuals in the team. So today I'm going to talk about one study that we looked at that's about gendered group composition. And it was actually motivated by a wonderful colleague of mine, Niljana Dasgupta at UMass. And in this study, she's a social psychologist, and in the study, she constructed engineered teams of different gendered group compositions. So she had all groups of 4 individuals. One group had 3 males and 1 female, so they were the male majority. And she had gender parity, and then she had a female majority, so 3 females and 1 male. And she looked at a host of different psychological measures, including self-efficacy after the interaction, sense of belonging, and also some mechanisms in the interaction, including just number of words spoken or number of posts spoken, entered. And she found these drastic differences across the different gender group composition, right? And so my team and I saw this and we were fascinated by the study, and we were like, let's take this and go a little bit further. Let's use this methodology that I'll tell you about in a second to sort of see if we can get deeper into the dynamics that that differ across these different gender group compositions. And so that's where we come to group communication analysis. This is a methodology that my team and I have created, which allows us, it's a computational linguistics methodology that allows us to capture the conversational patterns that are reflective of critical sociocognitive processes that reflect inclusive or lack of inclusive dynamics in online multi-party interactions more broadly. We've also used this to understand the emergent roles that individuals occupy within a team. So are you a leader or a follower or a socially isolated individual, or a host of other things, but we'll get into that in a second. Okay, so this is the a really simplified version of the type of data you might get out of any type of virtual interaction, where you have something like the speaker ID, so who is talking, the team that they're in, the discourse that they said, and the time that they said it. There's tons of rich information in here that we rely on when we engage in any type of communication that's not captured by traditional natural language processing techniques. So the goal is, or the question is, how do we go from this semi-unstructured data to something more meaningful, something that allows us to capture the critical sociocognitive processes taking place within an interaction as it unfolds over time. So for instance, here in the schematic view, we have person A, B, C, D, E interacting across time. And each one of these bubbles could be a contribution. And what GCA allows us to do is quantify the relationship, the semantic and conceptual overlap between the utterances between people as they engage over time, and then construct several different theoretically grounded measures of that interaction. And we do this using discourse cohesion. There's tons of different ways to do this, the latent semantic analysis glove, skipgram, and so forth. But the main idea to take away is that this is an approach that allows us to quantify the semantic and conceptual meaning between two pieces of text. So in this context, it's two posts or contributions in a Zoom meeting over time, to understand the semantic overlap between those things. And then right now we have 6 different measures. We have a host of other new measures that are coming out, but right now this study involves 6. So the first is just mere participation. So this is getting at that kind of surface level critical information, like how much are you participating, but it's not enough. And so the remaining measures come out of the discourse cohesion, where we have 3 responsivity measures. Now, these are theoretically modeled on literature coming out of the collaborative problem solving, collaborative learning literature, where we have a measure of overall responsivity. So this is capturing the degree to which my current contribution, for instance, is semantically related to the previous contributions from my peers. So this is basically social regulatory information. So am I building on and monitoring the contribution, building on and monitoring the contributions from my teammates to move the conversation forward, or am I ignoring them? We also have a measure of internal cohesion. So not only should I be building on and monitoring with my teammates, but I should have a level of cohesion myself. This is getting into self-regulatory literature. So this is capturing the degree to which my current contribution, for instance, is semantically related to my previous contribution. We then have a measure of social impact. And so this is one of my favorite measures, but this is capturing the degree to which my current contribution is semantically related to the subsequent contributions from other people that I'm speaking to. So here I'm saying, is what I'm saying important or seen as important by others, and therefore picked up to move the conversation forward, or not? And then the remaining 2 measures right now come out of the team science literature, where we have a measure of newness. And this is getting at the idea of a famous known thing in team environments, is that people tend to share information that's known to everyone instead of information that they uniquely bring to the table. So like their expertise or something. There's a host of different psychological reasons for this, like saving face or a group thing. But anyways, people tend to do this. So this is capturing the amount of new information, new novel information versus given information that the contribution is providing. And then we have a measure of communication density. Again, out of the team science literature, the idea here is that effective communication is concise and condensed. So this is how much semantically rich information is provided in each utterance. And so these are the 6 theoretically grounded measures. Like I said, there are more coming out right now that this research is based on. So we've used this to model, to explore various dynamics in over 8,000 individuals in 6,000 groups across a host of different types of interactions. So everything from small group interactions that we're going to be talking about today to more distributed interactions that take place in massive open online courses or crowdsourced design interactions and so forth. Oh, and I should say that we just got the patent on this, which is really exciting because it was a long 3 or 4 year process. Okay, so we've evaluated the practical value. So what? We can measure these things. What does this actually matter? What does this actually matter? Across a host of different outcomes. So one, the main one is, do these things generalize? And I've shown that we have high generalization, but also how they influence the outcomes in learning, the outcomes in problem solving. Do varying levels of these at both the individual and team level have critical impacts on the outcomes of those interactions? And we have several studies that some are listed below here that we explore that with. And today, like I said, I'll be talking about this in the context of inclusion. So specifically, how do these things differ across different populations of individuals, specifically different gendered group compositions? So the data set that we explore is from Jamie Pennebaker. It's a good colleague of mine at UT Texas. And if you're familiar with any natural language processing stuff, he is actually the person that invented LINQ, linguistic inquiry word count. So there's that. And so this was a really great data set. So people were randomly assigned into over 800 students, randomly assigned into about 184 randomly assigned groups. But because we wanted to only explore, similar to that PNAS article that I put up on my second slide, we only wanted teams of 4 individuals. So we restricted the data set to about 132 individuals in 33 groups. So the setup is that they read an assigned reading, they logged onto an educational platform, they took a pre-test, interacted for a little bit, and then took a post-test. So today I'm not getting into the pre and post test information. I'm really interested in those 4 different gender group compositions. So we have a female majority grouping here and a female minority grouping over here. And so the first thing to take away from this is that the main difference resides in these deeper level socio-cognitive processes where we see differences across the social impact, internal cohesion, and overall responsivity. And that female students outperform male students in terms of those measures when they are both in the minority and the majority. And then finally, that actually in the female, when males are in the the minority, they actually perform a little bit better. So when they're with 3 other females, it shows that they become more responsive. They have a little bit higher internal cohesion. They also have a little bit higher social impact. So the takeaway here is that more females is better. And I guess we already knew that, but now we can quantify it. That's a joke, kind of. Anyway, so it appears that GCA allows us to have a robust method for identifying interpersonal behavior and online multi-party interactions, and that those and that the methodology allows us to understand how varying levels of composition can influence the overall mechanisms and how individuals interact. So we're doing a lot right now, moving this line of research forward. So one is in terms of the actual analytical techniques, GCA. We're scaling this up so that we can do, because it's a computational approach, we can do real-time analyses. We're also moving to look at what we were before COVID, looking at face-to-face interactions, and we'll start getting back into that as well, because with all of the speech-to-text technology with Alexa and all of these systems, it's actually relatively easy to do this, or easier to do it than it was before. We're also expanding in terms of constructs. So as you've heard me say repeatedly, these measures are socio-cognitive in nature, and affect is a huge missing component from right now in terms of GCA. But we know that affect is critical for any type of human interaction. So you can imagine us creating measures. What we're working on right now is affective impact, right? So when I get frustrated in a team interaction, how does that percolate through the system? Or do people ignore me? And what are the implications of that, of engaging with me or not engaging? We're also looking at different temporal dynamics. So right now, GCA is calculated obviously on this very micro level, message to message, and then it's rolled up to the individual in this particular analysis. But there are varying levels of dynamics that you can imagine. Immediate responsivity, for instance, might mean something psychologically different from a delayed responsivity. So some people are just going to sit and think for a minute and then maybe come in 5 minutes later in an interaction and have this huge sort of like summary and moving the conversation forward sort of approach. And then finally, we're designing we have plans for several experiments coming this fall and moving forward that look at the implications of these. So looking at how does this influence sense of belonging and self-efficacy when you have these different dynamics for different populations? And then looking at how we can start to provide feedback for different individuals. So some of the things are, having a dashboard that faces teachers, across disciplines, because collaborative problem solving is critical in all sorts of, it's cross-disciplinarily important. And then also a student-facing dashboard. So you can imagine when you're interacting with people, you want to maybe see your responsivity. Like, are you engaging in a productive manner or not, or directed for responsivity? So providing them with a means to say, hey, why don't you follow up on what Alexa said the other day or earlier in the conversation about X, Y, and Z. Also for younger populations, we're looking at gamifying things with badges and so forth. And then with that, I will say thank you guys so much. I'll thank all of my postdocs, graduate students, and undergraduates, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Nia. So if you have questions, please approach the microphones, and otherwise I'll take questions from the chat. So while people think, I actually have a question in terms of how you think about defining the temporal dynamics and the scaling of the temporal dynamics, because I always found that tricky within interactions. So at what level of scaling do you think we should be looking for meaning or?
Oh, I see. So I think what I was getting at a moment ago is I think that there is meaning at different levels of any interaction. And I think, I don't know that one is better than the other, but I think that they mean different things. So my example was, right now, for instance, I'm doing things using a moving window, right? That then is averaged up. And so you always lose information when you average things up to the individual level. And we also have other studies that have looked at the overall team level. But if we dive even below the individual level and say within an interaction, or maybe how somebody is engaging at the beginning, middle, or end of an interaction, you can get different information. So I would say that I think it's an open question. I think that you can derive different measures at different time scales. I'm not sure if that answered your question. But
yeah, no, that answers the question. I'm actually of the mind that you can find different information depending on the scale you look at.
Exactly.
A really interesting question in terms of how to integrate the information. Across.
Right.
Any other questions? So otherwise, we'll just thank Nia again.
Thank you so much for having me.